In this video, I'm going to show you an example of a code that I wrote. I began this process of trying to figure out and design this project as very much a beginner at coding. I knew very, very little about it. So I've spent a fair bit of time practicing and learning, but I'm still very much a beginner. So this isn't something that would be completely unrealistic for a beginner to design. My inspiration came from when we designed the basketball to bounce around the screen. It reminded me of the old video game Pong, and I thought I can try and build something like that. So I know I wanted to start with coding the ball, which I made black, and you can see on the right my main screen, and we'll look at what each bit of code does as we go here in just a bit. So the black ball over here right now, I coded it. I wanted it to always start in the middle, which I knew would be x0, but I wanted it to start in a different place each time vertically. I decided to just have the code pick a random number for y between -110 and 110. That gets it close to the edges, but not too close to where it'll automatically bounce when it starts. And I have it picking a random direction from 1 to 360. So it can start along the middle of the screen in any direction, as well as a little bit up and down. And I just started there and coded it to, if it's on the edge, bounce. I wanted it to move several steps, so you'll see those blocks right here. Those were the next blocks I added. So when I first started, I basically just had it going to a position, pointing in a direction, and then repeating, moving 6 steps, and if on edge, bounce. The colors I added in, I knew that I had to have a scoring zone for each side. So I made a new stage, a new backdrop, and added the green and the red colors to each side, because I needed a way for the ball to recognize that it had reached a scoring zone. So I just designed a new stage, made colors, painted them on each side, and then that allowed me to change the forever to a repeat until. So the ball will bounce and bounce off of the edge until it has touched either red or green. And I just picked those colors directly by clicking on them. Then I was testing. I wanted to make sure everything worked. So I will hit the arrow and that sets up a new one. The space key is what I programmed to start the setup. So the ball will release from a random point, and it will go in a random direction, bouncing off the edge until it reaches one of the scoring zones. That's all I had coded at first, and that was a good start for what I needed to do. Then I knew I needed to figure out how to code paddles. In Pong, there was a paddle that you could scroll up and down. So I just designed my own sprite. I made it a rectangle, and you can see that it is facing sideways here. When I looked at this sprite, when I set up this sprite, I had the issue of I had it setting way over here, so that when I moved it, it was moving incorrectly. So I realized I had to have the sprite set on the center at all times, because that allowed me to control it correctly. So that was some problem solving I had to do while working this code. And I also realized if I wanted it to move up and down, I had to start it horizontal, so when it changes direction to either go up or down, it would be facing the right orientation. So it would be facing 90 degrees, it would be rotated 90 degrees or -90 degrees, which would make it vertical. I did the same thing with the other paddle and just made them separate colors. That way I could then go into coding what each paddle would do. In the original Pong game, the way the ball bounced off was dependent on which pixel it hit on your paddle. I didn't feel like I knew how to do that. I thought a good substitute would be to set it up so that if the ball hits the paddle, it will bounce. It will point in a random direction within a couple of constraints. So I gave myself about a 90-degree window, and I chose either between 45 and 135 or 225 and 315 because those were centered around starting perfectly horizontal the other way. So now I had it set up so that the ball would start, point in a random direction, and I also realized I had to have these if-thens before the ball moving in a random direction or on edge. If these were after, the code didn't work and it didn't recognize that it was hitting them. I needed it to check if it was touching the paddle before anything else in this code happened, so I had to move these up. But then I ran into the issue of how do I code the paddles? How do I make them move? And I realized I have to code each sprite separately. So for each sprite, I have it set up so that when the space key is pressed and the ball is launched, it will go to a Y position of 0 and an X value that I just drug it to. I drug them to about the same spot on each side, noted the X value over here, and just coded that in. And I also coded so that when I hit the up arrow and down arrow for the blue sprite, or the purple sprite I should say, it would move 20 steps up or 20 steps down. So point in direction 0 or point in direction 180. And that allowed it to move directly up and down. I did the same thing with the light blue, having it go to a very similar X position. They're slightly different because the scoring zones on the sides are a little bit different in size. I wasn't pixel perfect with it, but I felt like I was close enough. So the sprites moving are just controlled by hitting either W and S or the up and arrow key, and that allows them to move. And every time a new ball is released, they reset to the center. So I can release the ball, and if the paddle contacts the ball, it will release it in a random direction. I felt I had a pretty good code going at this point. I had designed a game, but it still didn't have any scoring or figuring out who won. So I went back to the ball, and I really struggled with this part. This part took me a very long time to figure out how to code. I basically set it up, and I had the if it touches the color, I wanted it to say someone's point. But from there, I wasn't certain how to show the score. I came up with the show variable. I talked to some people who are better at this than I am. They explained the variables to me. So I was able to go over here. I made my own variable, one of which I called light blue score, one of which I called purple score, and I just have them displayed up here in the top. And I wanted it to show if the ball hits either of the scoring zones. I wanted it to show both of the score updates and change the score. So I created another if-then statement. So if the color black is touching the color green, which corresponds to purple scoring, I wanted it to show both variables, purple score and light blue score. And I wanted it to change the purple score by 1. Now, something I realized right before I started filming this, if I take, because this is an if-then and this is an if-then statement with the exact same parameters, I can actually take all three of these out and it should function the same way. So I'm going to take those out, reconnect everything else, and put this in up here with this if-then, because it's the same parameter. If black is touching green, then I want it to say purple point for 1 second, show both variables, and change purple score by 1. So let's test that on the fly. Let's see how it works. So I got lucky, it started immediately left, it displayed both, and purple score went up. So I'm going to go ahead and change the other one as well, because I can simplify my code by doing that. And it puts all of the common variables in the same place. So I'm just going to drag those blocks out of the way. So let's check and make sure it does it on the other side as well. There's one going that way. Okay, so it updated the score that way. So I was really happy. I had a scoring method. I had the game programmed. You could play. You could have two different people on the keyboard, each one controlling a different paddle. But there was no way to see who won. So I wanted to code a new screen if someone wins. And I picked 10 points for the winning score. I felt like that was a decent number. And I wanted it to play a little sound, and it would change the backdrop. I wanted it to say on screen who won. The only way I could figure out how to make that to work is make a new backdrop that has who wins on it. So I have actually 4 different backdrops for this code. This is the instruction backdrop, and you can even see here my scoring zones. When you hit the green flag, it'll immediately go to the game stage, which is just my generic backdrop. And then I have a stage saying light blue wins and a stage saying purple wins. And back in the code for the ball, I have it set up so that if purple's score equals 10, so my variable, one of my variables equals 10, it will change the stage to the purple win stage, and it will play a sound. So if either of these get to the score of 10, the stage will change, and it will tell us who wins the game. So we saw once light blue hit 10, it played a little sound, and it changed the stage to light blue wins. If I want to from there, I could start a new game, because I have it set up so that when the green flag is clicked, it'll set both scores to 0 and switch the backdrop to game stage. So this will create a new game from here. This was something, it was complex, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out because I really don't know much about coding, but it wasn't something that I felt like was unaccomplishable. It was a simple task, and I was able to look through the different tools that are in here and figure out as I went what I wanted it to do. I started just with the ball bouncing, decided from there, okay, I can color in the backdrop and make winning areas or point areas, goals. Well, then I needed the paddles to be able to play the game. So I troubleshot that, designed the paddles, and then for me the hardest part was setting up the scoring and figuring out how to do the stage changes. That part took me the better part of a weekend to figure out, but in the end I came up with a code that I can feel pretty proud of. And that's what I want you guys to do as well. I want you to design something you can be proud of. It may not be the most complex code in the world, but if you follow these steps and are able to build a basic understanding of this and understand the logic behind it, that's the goal of this project. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out. We're always here to help. And good luck with designing your codes.